I want to talk a little bit about Handmaid's Tale.
This is a great one.
Rachel and I always had this idea of like maybe we'll do a whole podcast series about Handmaid's Tale, and we were like watching the entire series and making notes, and then Rachel resigned, and we just kind of like never got around to it. But I think at this point, hopefully, most pro-lifers are familiar enough with Handmaid's Tale to understand, to recognize if you see protesters with these kind of red dresses on and white bonnets, this is a Handmaid's Tale thing. Handmaid's Tale is this dystopic novel that has been turned into a series on Hulu about kind of this future theocracy called Gilead, where basically the religious fundamentalist Christians took over government and have enforced all kinds of crazy regimes, and it is very, very extreme, to the point that if you haven't seen Handmaid's Tale, you need to understand this basic fact. Is that the premise of the show is that because like the religion is so like pro kids and everything, and wanting to make sure that kids are happening, is that they are enslaving some of the women, forcing them to have sex in order to impregnate them in order to have more kids. And that is what pro-life people are being compared to, like, a lot. So this isn't Handmaid's Tale. This is not the prequel to Handmaid's Tale. And of course, pro-life people wouldn't want that. That's not something that we're at all interested in. That's horrific. And so a few things that we'd want to say is like, first, I want to end an abortion because it kills an innocent human life that is just as valuable as you and I. You probably disagree with me about that, and that's okay. There's lots of discussion, happening between pro-life and pro-choice people about that. But ultimately, what I'm advocating for is non-violent solutions to the very real problems that pregnancy can cause. I'm not advocating for forcing anyone into pregnancy. Forcing someone to have sex is rape, by the way. I'm saying that once another human exists, which biologically speaking is when fertilization is complete, it should not be legal to kill that human. I also want better dialogue in this issue between people who disagree about abortion's morality, which is the whole point of what ERI does, as you all know. And we want better support for pregnant women and mothers in the workplace during their education and just in general. And we want fathers to be held accountable for child support and prenatal child support. But there are some things that pro-life advocates don't want. We don't want women being forced into pregnancy, pregnant women being controlled by the government or mistreated, or women being investigated or prosecuted for miscarriages. All of this to say, the Handmaid's Tale imagery seems to come from a place of fear about what will happen if abortion becomes illegal, perhaps fear that is being stoked by the other side, probably intentionally, in at least some cases. And I think the fear is coming from a misunderstanding of what pro-life people like me actually want and believe.
I just want to highlight one thing that you said there, Josh, was the idea that what we are advocating for as pro-life people is non-violent
Yep.
solutions to the very real problems that people can face during a pregnancy. That's one of
The
my
key
favorite
phrase.
sound bites. I use it all the time because there's two pieces there. Talking about the idea that abortion is violence, and I am arguing for non-violent solutions, and that can lead us to a great side of the conversation with the person I'm talking to. And then that second piece, that it's nonviolent solutions to the very real problems that pregnancy can cause. I think sometimes pro-life people don't take enough time to acknowledge what we truly do know to be true. An unplanned pregnancy can be very difficult on someone's life in a variety of ways, and a planned pregnancy can also be very difficult on someone's life, even physically alone, not to mention all the other things that are going on. We recently recorded a podcast, and if I can find the link, I'll drop it in the chat, with Monica Snyder from Secular Pro-Life. And one of my favorite parts of that podcast is when Monica talked about her experience. As we recorded that podcast, she was, I think, 8 months pregnant, and she was talking about how pro-life people often are not willing to acknowledge how hard pregnancy is, and how she, as a pregnant person, feels very strongly about how difficult pregnancy is, how much she hates being pregnant, in her own words, and how we should not be afraid to talk about that. So I'll throw a link to that in the chat, one of my favorite podcasts we've done recently. But that's something that pro-life people should not be afraid to talk about, and I think that's key to responding to the whole Handmaid's Tale idea effectively.